Greetings, everyone. Welcome once again to the Outhouse podcast. I'm here with my co-hosts Mad Matt, Test Zero, and Ojunix, and today we're talking about Final Fantasy in name only. I mean, the spirits within.
Spirits within with Mentos freshness to help save the world.
This
Fresh
is
take.
this is such a weird one.
Yeah, this
My
this is gonna be a tough one
my
to.
brain melted while we were watching this. I
I,
this isn't the worst movie we've done, but it's just so mind-numbingly weird to.
I,
Yeah, I have seen
It's a
this
good
movie
idea. It's made
about.
it extremely
I,
dull.
I
Yeah,
can't
I
believe
have
I'm
seen this movie about 6 times, and I have only recently realized whether it's good or bad.
I can't believe I'm saying this, but as much as I raged and bitched about it, Dead or Alive is better than this.
You know what? It's just mildly better. Yes,
Because
just mildly.
as much as because at least I kind of understand what the hell was going on for one
You know, you
thing.
know, you know why the DOA is better than this movie?
Why?
Because it's more interesting to go what the hell's going on in this movie than in DOA than in Spirits Within.
It's more
In Spirits Within,
entertaining.
you're
It's
going,
more
what the hell's
Yeah,
going on?
watchable.
You're
yeah,
just
You
that,
actually
being
that,
know
bored to
what the
death.
hell's going on. It's something you can
yeah,
follow.
Yeah.
yeah. Even I have to give DOA that because at least I knew where the plot was going and I knew what was happening, and at least as
Yeah,
much
you're
as
going,
again
what's
as
going
much
on, but you understand what's going on. The question you're really asking is, why is this happening?
All
I
right.
mean, as much as again, as much as I bitched about it, as TC puts it, it was entertaining. Here, I'm going. Is anything happening yet?
So
Yeah.
No, matter of fact, I had a dinner in the middle of this movie and didn't lose anything.
before we really get going, let's go around real quick and talk about what people were remembering about the movie going into it before we actually started watching it. So let's start with Matt. Matt, what were your memories of this prior to rewatching it?
So when this movie came out, for some reason as a child, I was such a big fan. I had the soundtrack. I'm not even sure if I have the soundtrack anymore. It might have gotten lost somewhere. I don't know. I haven't looked for it in ages. I will say after repeated viewings, I became more and more bored with it, and I actually got really bored of the soundtrack after a while too. So, yeah, not exactly the most fond memories of this one. Maybe at first, and maybe the character models looked particularly nicely made and all, but the story's a boring, dull shred.
Yeah. TZ, what did you remember going into this?
Saw this movie in theaters.
I'm sorry.
I was a
I
big
can't,
I
I'm
was
can't
a
remember.
so
huge Final
Maybe,
Fantasy stan at the time this came out.
yeah.
I would play all the games. I would get them at release, and I saw this movie in theaters, and I
I
have seen this like 5, 6 times since, and I still have no idea whether it's any good. That's the
I
amazing
will
thing, is
actually
that this movie kind of confuses you into whether it's because visually it's phenomenal, but when you try to break it down and when you wait for a siren outside your window to finally fucking move away and you have no way to do it and you don't want to edit the podcast because you have to wait for that shit. When you finally break it down and you try to figure out this movie, it makes no goddamn sense.
no. And actually, now that your whole memory of going back to the theater actually jogged my memory, I actually think I went to this movie with my buddy Mike and maybe my buddy Fred, but for sure with my buddy Mike. And I have to say, me and Mike also went to the Pokemon movie. I much would have rather watched that.
I don't think I saw any of the Pokemon movies in
The
theaters.
first one definitely did, though. The Revenge of Mewtwo, yeah, I'd watch that any day over this one. At least
Ojunix.
something happens in that plot, even if it kind of reboots itself at the end.
Ojunix.
uh, I sadly, much like many other video game movies at the time when I was younger, for whatever reason, this was probably the highest on the caliber that I was defending it greatly, thinking it was the greatest thing ever because, you know, because I appreciate animation more than live action in general parts. But also the fact, I was like, it's Final Fantasy, it's great, it's awesome, it's CGI, the main character is hot as hell. And the older I got, I'm just once again I just go back and think, well, what the hell was wrong with me?
So
Because
what you're
Yeah, I was very much in the same boat because I liked Final Fantasy, and there was a
Yeah.
Final Fantasy
Yeah,
movie, so
yeah.
like obviously it's a good
Yeah,
movie, right?
but
No.
but then it says the thing was actually I think barely because not that long after I actually saw it, because mind you, I was defending it because I hadn't seen it. I was just going by the trailers. When
Mm.
I finally actually got to see it on DVD, I was like, "What's
Oh.
what?
Oh
Really?"
no.
And I'm just thinking, Pokemon the first movie made more sense than this.
wait. So you were defending it before you'd actually seen it.
Yes.
Well, because that
Well,
was at the time when
so
all
you're
video game movies
Yeah.
sucked anyway,
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
people said the movie sucked because they didn't understand because they never saw the
I
video game. Whereas like
I
this
I, I
was
I
based on
think
its own thing.
I think to a degree I was also probably defending it because kept hearing how Square was actually working behind it, where all the others didn't technically have their game companies
wait. This was
behind.
produced by Square. It bankrupted
Yeah.
them.
Right.
Yeah.
But
But I was
I,
gonna say. I was gonna say. So what?
again, I'm going by my mindset back then to express.
But what I was gonna say. So what you're telling us is when you were younger, like you were a boy version of Max from Life is Strange.
Sadly, I that's probably when I
She sees a
I'm
big. She
pretty
sees a
sure-
big plasma TV. First thing she says is how she wants to
I'm
watch
pretty sure a
Spirits
couple of
Within
us
on
have
it.
just admitted that we
I-
were back then, but we grew out of it before Max's age.
Yeah. It is because it's just when like I said, when I actually did finally see it, I was just so confused. I wasn't bored, just really confused. As like I thought it looked pretty, and that's probably the one thing I will give the movie. It does look pretty,
Yeah, this movie
but
it looks phenomenal even today. I mean, it's only in like the last 5 years has it really started to show its age,
but
which is amazing.
but it was just so confusing because I didn't understand anything. And then rewatching it again today, I think I even more confused because I don't think it clicked with me. The fact is, we explain things, but we don't really explain things.
Yeah, this I feel like this
They
movie kind
explain
of
them, but not
marks
satisfactorily.
a important evolution in my sense as a movie critic, where I remember this was like the very first movie that I wrote a review for because I was like posting reviews on like websites and stuff. It was this movie and it was the Def Leppard biopic Hysteria. These was like the first two movies that I ever wrote reviews for. And just I was just positive towards them because I was still learning media literacy and stuff like that. So it's just I kind of echoes like all that stupid thing. This movie is a treat for the people that dig action and dig visuals and like what the fuck am I talking about?
And quite
Was
frankly,
I thinking?
there's not really a lot of action, even though
No,
the
it
trailer,
isn't. That's the
even
thing that
though
we
the trailer-
realized seeing this movie is that it's not a whole lot of action and the story it's just not an enjoyable movie to watch. The sad thing
No.
is Steve Buscemi gets some of the best lines in the movie and they're not even that funny, but just compared to how dour and just sad and depressing the rest of the movie is, they just kind of rise to just
Above
be
everyone
really
else,
funny
yeah.
in comparison.
his lines literally are so low, but because the movie is even lower, his low jokes seem high.
Yeah. It's
Which
not
is-
that they're
which-
funny,
which-
it's just the rest of the movie is so devoid of
It's
humor.
like you hear him say something, and you laugh not because it was particularly funny, but because it was interesting enough to wake you up.
Yes, you're
It
just
was the only
desperate for
good
any
thing on
sort of
screen.
anything enjoyable in this movie.
It basically, because it gives you that brief chuckle, you just go, "Oh crap! Now I'm awake. I have to actually pay attention again," because the movie basically,
Oh.
Yeah.
pretty
Oh,
much
and
put
here-
you to
no,
sleep.
and now more bad things are happening just after we had a good light moment with this character.
Oh
Oh,
yeah,
fuck.
yeah. The fact they kill the one funny guy.
Well, they kill
But-
everybody, so but
I-
yeah,
They
he's
killed
one
just
of the
about
first to die.
But
Yeah.
one of those moments was him having a really good epic moment and then just immediately
Yeah.
getting nerfed.
I feel like they just like, well, we have Final Fantasy, and we sometimes have one character die, we need to do something impressive. Let's kill half the cast.
That was more
Let's
than
do something
that. It was way
impressive.
more
Let's
than half
play
the
Game
cast.
of Thrones.
But-
this movie has a body count.
But my memories of this movie from previously watching it were actually kind of a haze, because the time that this movie came out was a time when I just didn't care about stuff that was story heavy. So I'm pretty positive when I watched this originally, I just zoned out and didn't really absorb anything that was happening.
I believe it.
Like
This movie is a word salad half the time. Yes.
Also, sorry, go ahead.
I've only gotten more interested in like more story heavy stuff in like my later years of life, honestly.
That makes sense. To a degree, I didn't really respect the storytelling that I was watching. I was more just watching stuff for the action.
Action and anime titties.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, pretty much. But later down, I got to appreciate that more because I was also appreciating the stories. So then when I'm getting stuff that I thought I liked or didn't understand and returning to it because I just only tolerate it because of the action, and then returning it and going, okay, the action wasn't even worth for the rest of this. What the hell?
Nope.
Like, I actually liked the movie Knives Out, but if I had seen that movie when I was in my 20s, I wouldn't have actually gotten past the first 20 minutes.
Damn.
Because it's not something that would have interested me back then.
Understandable. I think a couple of movies I had the same feeling that I saw later. Like,
Meanwhile, I still can't watch Godfather, which that might be a movie to,
I have still never seen Godfather.
that might be a movie to do
Yeah.
for this podcast, just so I
It
can
might
force
be,
myself to
yeah.
watch it.
I think everyone here has heard of it, but never watched it.
that's one. Either we isn't that movie like almost 3 hours long?
Possibly.
Yeah, I think so.
There's a lot of
It is
movies that are
extremely
3 hours
long,
long, though.
yeah.
It happens
I
more
know.
often than you think. But yeah, you guys already touched on the fact that Steve Buscemi's character, what was his name again?
Neil.
Neil was
Neil
like
was voice place.
was like the pilot. I basically pointed out he was basically like Joker from Mass Effect without brittle bones. Obviously this was actually before Mass Effect, but just kind of a funny coincidence that the freaking is that like a trope that the pilot's always a jokester?
And to a
It might
degree,
be.
yes. To a degree, yes. Actually,
It might be. I think that could actually make you come from Han Solo a bit.
Yeah, a little bit. I mean, if you look at Sid in 7, he's kind of a he's
a grumpy old man, but he's also a bit of a
In
jokester,
4,
yeah.
he was kind of awesome too.
I mean, he basically just likes. I mean, it wasn't almost every other line of dialogue. He just threw a swear.
Pretty much, yeah.
But yeah, briefly talk about the story in this. The overall story for the people that are fortunate enough not to have watched this movie.
The thing is, you kind of have to know the story in this movie before you even try to watch it, because you're
Yes.
dropped into the movie. The term is in media res,
Yeah.
where you're just dropped right into the middle of it, and you have to hope that they explain this through exposition, which in a good story they would do. But here, the story is just not well told enough. You're not explained any of the backstory. You just kind of have to grasp at straws to kind of understand it.
Yeah, and it's basically a apocalyptic world where these monsters called phantoms that came out of a meteor that crashed into the Earth have fucked up the world, and they're trying to figure out how to stop them.
Yes, and you call them phantoms despite the fact that they are obviously ghosts.
Correction, spirits. Which is still ghosts, which is phantom, which is also in turn phantoms.
Yeah,
But-
that's this weird translation
it's
thing where
just
they call
very
them
weird
phantoms because they're these
terminology, yeah.
creatures that you can't see them unless they're kind of charged with electricity or like energy, and then you can sort of see them and kill them or defeat them or whatever the term would be. And it turns out that these are not. That these all started to appear after a meteor struck the Earth, and then these creatures started coming out of it, which everybody believes to be an alien invading force. And then they have the group led by Dr. Aki Ross and Dr. Sid that are trying to collect 8 spirits to try to create a. The thing is, they're collecting 8 spirits to try to create a waveform that will counteract the waveform of the phantoms. And the weird thing about that is that that is really, really, really poorly explained.
Explain.
Like, why
It really
do they
is.
need these 8 specific spirits? Why can one spirit be killed and they need to find a compatible spirit? The way I see it is that when you're creating an organic waveform, you have to start with something else organic. You can't just use a synthetic waveform to synthesize it. You have to find kind of, so the idea that you have the Gaia waveform, which is like everything, and then you have all the other spirits that are created from Gaia. So it's like taking a slice of this waveform, and that's how you get these spirits out of it. So there's enough from 8 that you can kind of get the entire. It's kind of like taking a panoramic image that's stitched together with a whole bunch of other images. And that's what they're trying to do by finding these 8 spirits. They're trying to find all the different 8 waveforms that all together add up to the spirit of Gaia, which can counteract the spirit of the aliens. That is my explanation.
Okay.
They do not explain that at
Wait,
all.
And keep in mind that one of the spirits that they have to get is from someone's energy pack.
Yeah,
They don't
it's
explain
because-
the logic of that, why it's in something that's not an organic being. And if
Actually, they do.
They
They
do.
do explain
Yeah,
that.
they
They
say the
explain
power
that the
source-
energy pack comes from
living
microscopic bioluminescent life.
yes,
it comes
but,
from microscopic.
but they don't really
microorganisms.
explain why there is the spirit they need in one energy pack, and they couldn't just gotten it out of a different energy pack.
Yeah, because they
It was
the way I
on
explained
their
it, it still
surface,
raises
best
so
they
many
explain
plot
it to.
holes. Yeah, I explained it, and that's only after watching it like 6 times. I'm able to kind of articulate what they're trying to do, but they do not explain this well in the movie at all.
I was gonna say your explanation makes some sense, and yet it takes the whole movie to the very end where Sid just basically says, "We sit and wait and see what happens."
Yes, exactly. So
Right.
it's not a terrible idea first. Like watching the cutscenes at the beginning of this thing, I keep calling it cutscenes. Watching the video at the beginning, it's like I kind of want to play this game once I get control of the character.
But that's the funniest thing. Every time the cutscenes transition, I swear to God, I kept expecting to suddenly it to switch to lower game graphics, and suddenly it's saying, "You see a dialogue box, and I need to press X or A or something," because
Press X to Jason.
Use the left
Yeah.
analog stick to move and collect
Yeah.
the press X to collect the spirit.
Because so many times it feels like they were just really overblown cutscenes, which to a degree,
It
Right.
essentially is that they were using the same sort of technology that they were using to make their
Right.
video game FMVs.
And we pointed out how even though they looked far higher quality than the character models you would see in video game FMVs at the times, the actual character animations felt like animations you would have seen in like old StarCraft FMV cutscenes.
and considering that they were basically using mocap for the animation models to move, that makes a decent amount of sense.
And then there's also the horrible inability for the character models to emote.
Good.
Oh god.
Yeah, let's express the scene of after what was his name? Gray.
Great.
After his entire team, his best friends that he's trained and fought alongside with for how many years, had all died in front of him, and he goes up to Aki while
Movie
they're
don't
ship.
surprise.
It's like there was one point, yeah, we didn't even know what expression the character
Yeah.
was supposed to be portraying until the caption on screen literally said crying.
I'm sorry.
Yeah.
The fact that you had to get from the subtitles, because when you look at her face, it's like she's trying to hold back a fart.
And keep in mind,
Dropping a
the
deuce.
average viewer would not have the captions on.
No,
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
of course talking about the average viewer, you have to think about what the average viewer thinks of what Final Fantasy is. It has the name fantasy in it. There is nothing familiar about Final Fantasy, even as a fan, in this movie.
No.
You look at something like Final Fantasy 7 or Final Fantasy 8 or not so much 9, but 10. That does lean very much into the fantasy sci-fi genre, but you still have a main character that uses a sword. You still have magic. You still have this sort of thing, even if they're in these technological cities of flying cars and stuff, and people that use guns. You still have something familiar with the term fantasy. You get nothing of that in this. It is so heavily laden with sci-fi, which
I was gonna say, because there's not even some would make the argument saying the aliens, or aka the spirits, phantoms, whatever, is like, no, that's probably more that's paranormal.
Yeah,
Than
that's
fantasy.
paranormal, which is kind of fantasy. It's the sense that they are talking about the idea of Gaia, the spirit of the earth, which it's the idea that this sort of what the term would be, this sort of like tree hugging faith based group wants to stop this obviously technologically advanced guy from destroying what from doing what he knows will save the earth or what he thinks will save the earth, and that the council is actually sort of kowtowing to them, which explains his frustration. But it's the whole idea that like they are they have this sort of unpopular opinion of this, but it should be very clear that that spirit theory is real when you literally see somebody's soul get ripped out of their body and eaten by a flying phantom.
Yeah,
would think.
but also the fact that again,
But
the
then
phantom
again,
thing. It's like we call them phantoms, but
they
we
would
call
have
them
been
phantoms
better
because we can
off
see.
with the terminology. We're just calling them aliens or invaders, and just go. We don't know what
Yeah,
they really are.
Yeah, you should.
It's almost like they
call,
wanted to come up with a term for them, but they didn't make
Huh.
up something. Like you
good
call
one.
them like yokai or
Yeah,
And
Yeah,
there
it's
was
like-
a point at the end where the main villain guy, General Hein, who's trying to blow the freaking phantoms up with a space laser and it isn't working, when he actually listens to her tell him that they're not alien invaders, they're ghosts. He basically he says, even if everything you say is true, they're still aggressors, so I have to blow them up. Which
um,
is honestly how a military general would probably react to that information.
Yeah.
yeah. But also the fact that he's literally in words is like, these spirits, these ghosts, and I don't believe such nonsense. It's like you literally call them phantoms. That's what a spirit is.
well, it's one thing to call them something. It's one thing to believe that it actually is that.
Even though, again, you say it, how we literally see the things tear a soul
Yeah, tear
out
somebody's soul out of their body, which
and
Again,
it's-
yeah.
but no,
Which
apparently-
honestly, that is probably one of the best effects in the movie. There is a certain
Yeah.
aspect of body horror to it,
Yeah,
which is
yeah, that-
actually really pretty
Yeah, that's like-
gruesome.
even though, and that's like the one thing again, besides it still looks pretty, that's actually a very gruesome but a very well done horrific scene because it emphasized what makes these things so dangerous. It's about the only thing they explain properly, which they don't even actually technically explain. They just show you, which I kind of approve more of because it shows, not tells.
Yeah,
But-
because
but-
they show you. That's the problem with this is they show and never tell.
Right.
Again, it's like
give an explanation and then just move on.
I feel like Sid was literally the directors just going, I could explain things, but I'm not going to.
I
We'll
could
explain
explain
this
things,
all later, and later is
but then
never
just
in this
not fin-
film.
He just goes, "I could explain
I-
things," and just
but I-
doesn't finish the sentence.
But you know what? I totally believe that. Sid was literally the director put in the movie because he didn't want to explain things.
You're making me think of that line from Destiny. I
Explanation.
could explain
Not for crazy
things,
people.
but I won't.
Exactly.
But because we kind of went off on a tangent, when I was trying to talk about the facial expressions.
Oh yeah. Right.
Like the funny thing is that scene was where she was supposed to be crying. Like
doesn't
to me, her facial expression more reminded me of what you see when someone goes to talk, their mouth opens, and then they realize they forgot what they were gonna say.
Yeah, because it looked like she was kind of like trying to giggle.
To me, she looked like she was just like really confused and not sure what to do.
And then there's a point earlier where she was talking about this horrific moment when finding the fifth spirit that she got from a little girl, where
And
this
she just looked
she tells you the sad story about how the girl died, and you can hear the sadness in her voice.
You can hear the sadness.
And
in
you-
Here,
the
the voice
she
actor
looks
is giving her
bored.
all with this.
You could
but
you
just-
could tell what they're trying to convey, but her face just said nothing and just takes
Nothing,
you out
yeah.
of the moment completely.
Yeah, there was no emote. You can hear it, but you're not
You hear
seeing
it,
it,
but you can't feel it.
But because this is a visual media, even though
Yeah.
you're also technically an audio media as well, but because you're watching and you're seeing the face not making an expression that relates to how she sounds, it causes a very confusion feeling in your brain.
Yeah, it's kind of like I was saying, it's kind of like cognitive dissonance, Where
Yeah,
like
Matter of fact, case in point, you can get more emotion out of my non-emotional 3D skeletal face than on her face.
Mhm.
See, he's smiling now.
Poggers.
uh
Yeah. I mean that's kind of a sad fact. It's just like
It's true though.
it's like I can express more emotion through this skeleton than I could with freaking Aki.
let's see, what was I
Wah,
gonna
wah,
say?
wah.
So should we use that as our jumping off point from them? They wanted, with the rendering on Dr. Aki Ross, they really wanted so much for Aki Ross to be the very
Nothing.
first
It-
virtual actress.
Yeah.
Something along those lines, yes.
I mean, they
You
were
would-
pushing
the-
her hard.
They were pushing her hard. She was on adult magazines and stuff, and there's still imagery out there of it, but like that went nowhere.
That's the thing, is that they were almost ahead of their time in that sense, where you look at the
Yeah,
idea
matter
of
of-
the market for 3D models that are already skeletal and rigged and everything, the idea for the aftermarket for
Compared
VTuber
to like
models
VTubers
and things
now,
like
yeah,
that.
they were ahead of their
And-
time,
and-
but
and
They were
just didn't
definitely
know how
ahead of
to
their
actually
time.
make
The
it
idea
go
that they could
anywhere.
make these like CG models and then animate them, they were kind of forward thinking in that sense, which they probably would have had been in on the ground floor of that thing if the movie was better. That's really
Yeah,
is the problem. This movie
that,
Yeah.
was
might have,
just
that might have helped them,
so
yes.
bad, so
Yeah.
poorly told,
Yeah, if
that
this
it
had
just
the,
killed any future plans they would have had.
yeah, but it is kind of funny considering the eyesight, as you just pointed out. If it succeeded, imagine what the landscape could be now. Which
So what we're
it-
saying here is Aki is the great great grandmother of all VTubers.
yeah,
she is
Aki Arcane.
she is Kizuna AI's ancient ancestor.
Akina Arcane.
No.
No,
Though at the same time, now I was going to point out how the whole AI thing is kind of makes it a lot more terrifying in hindsight.
Yeah, because they're trying that. Like there are huge issues with what they want to do legally because people have
Yeah.
pointed out that technically you can't copyright anything that was created by AI because it has to have actually been created by a human for you to copyright it. And
Just like just like the whole thing about animals taking pictures is automatically in the public domain.
yeah, there's certain issues with the way copyright is set up that kind of make it so. I mean, if they really want to push it, you know, they'll grease some palms, and all of a sudden the politicians will be, oh yeah, sure, we can't discriminate against the AI. That would be robophobic.
That's not how that works, but yeah, I
try to tell that
sadly-
to the government. They don't know any better.
yeah.
So then keep
Like,
passing
and-
laws
This is
about
seriously what
technology they
zeros,
don't
but they have
understand.
I know.
feelings.
I know, and the fact is, you totally can see Hollywood pushing this. Well, hell, even Japan to a lesser degree.
I don't
'cause
think Hollywood would. It would be a Hollywood competitor.
either way, the
Maybe.
fact is, I mean, they're keep pushing. You know, the second an actor passes away, they're immediately like, well, let's take an AI,
Oh.
copy their voice, and could use it in some future endeavor.
Yeah, that well, and
Yeah.
that's one thing that has been creepy with a couple things where they've recreated a dead actor because they did that with
Rogue One,
yeah, in Rogue
They
One,
did that
what's
for a
his name,
small moment,
Tarkin.
Rogue One.
Tarkin, and Leia,
Actually, a bigger role with Tarkin, yeah.
and
They
Leia.
also did a smaller one with Leia, and
Right.
the Leia one didn't bother me, but the Tarkin one was.
Well,
like,
the thing is,
that looked
Carrie Fisher
weird.
wasn't dead when they made Rogue One, so they
Yeah,
weren't.
so they
used-
kind of had to use
They
it.
actually
To,
got the actual
finish
dialogue
that
from her,
up.
yeah.
Okay.
but the
it's
problem
just-
is with Tarkin, his actor was dead, so there's no like I highly doubt his family got any money for his likeness being used in that.
That
No.
actor has been dead since the 70s. He died like literally within a year of the original
actually-
Star Wars coming out.
And Japan is now pushing with a couple of their dead people well known in some animes are now trying to use their voices in audios.
I
books.
think it was much more what's the word? I'll just say acceptable the way they recreated Dr. Loomis in the Halloween reboot, where
Oh
they
yeah, because
they got
that
they
was
got a
weird.
really good look-alike and used
And then-
makeup and other visual effects to disguise the fact that it's
they
clearly not him.
disguised his face a bit, yeah, so they could actually make it look like him as opposed to like just a CG thing that walks down the stage and looks terrible.
I think that's acceptable because technically one
Yeah.
that's real.
That's what I'm
person.
saying. That's
They
what I'm
actually
saying.
got a
That
real
to me,
person there,
that's
yeah.
acceptable if you manage to physically make someone look like the person as opposed to a machine made a digital replica of them.
Yeah. That's a little more awkward.
And the thing
Th-
is,
that also being said, by the way, dragging Carrie Fisher's dead corpse onto that last Star Wars trilogy movie. Oh,
oh, right.
I think most of it was unused footage, but yeah,
she was digitally cut out of unused footage. Yes.
that was
It literally felt like watching a corpse walk
well,
on
well
screen. Like,
as long as this
ah.
podcast keeps going, we will get to Star Wars movies eventually.
Eventually.
And if not, we'll replace you with an AI, and then we'll be able to continue.
I like this movie. It was so funny. Ah.
Why are you showing that girl from Gravity Falls? Correction, the AI.
I'm
girl.
trying to think of what was the name of the obnoxious Asian girl in the Star Wars sequels.
I know you're talking
I
about.
remember her actress's name, but I can't remember the character's name.
Rose?
Rose Tico. Yeah, Rose Tico is the best character. That's
Yeah,
how
Rose.
how you know that
Yeah.
it's not really me if that
Yeah.
comes out of my mouth.
And again,
although
it's
admittedly
not-
she's not the worst character.
No,
No, she's not the worst character, but she's
and-
still not great. None of the characters are great in those
Oh.
movies.
I just want to emphasize, we're talking about the character of the story,
Yeah.
not the actress. There is nothing wrong
Actors,
with
No,
the
no,
actress.
actors, as
no.
far as I'm concerned, did what they could with although they were given.
Not only that, I'd say her actress is beautiful, but they made her look frumpy and unattractive in the movie.
Right?
Well, that and not very good.
And see, this could all be avoided if you just use artificial actresses. Are you gonna get mad at an AI?
I guess. Actually, you know, oh my God, that's how we get Skynet, is they get AI actors and actresses, and when people harass the AI, it decides humanity must die.
Does that mean that the Skynet's gonna pick the face of Arnold to be its new face? And that's why it eventually remakes his face and uses his voice for a Terminator.
And
It-
It's
and
all
and,
coming
and,
full circle.
and it realizes the concept of irony and references. So it
Then it just implodes.
So it literally has like a boombox on its back, so that when it's walking around, you just constantly hear da dun dun da dun da dun dun da dun.
you know, it's kind of funny in irony because when you think about it, the fact that we keep trying to that people want to push the AIs, and yet it's like we literally have movies and stories to emphasize what is going to happen,
Yeah,
and yet you keep trying to make it happen.
they keep trying to replace workers with machines, and they don't understand that's how you get Skynet.
We have made the Nexus from the classic sci-fi story. Please do not make the Torment Nexus.
You realize they tried to push an Ed 209 in California, right?
No.
I did not.
Yes, and the public backlash was so massive, they literally went, nope, never mind. I wonder why.
Oh gee,
I
don't
can
know.
I can only picture the situation of that. You have 5 seconds to stop shitting on the ground.
They try calling it a ground drone, and it's like, no, I know exactly what you're doing, motherfucker. Mm-mm.
Are we?
Are we even still talking about Final Fantasy at this point?
Right.
I think we've ran out of things to talk about. Like,
To a degree, that's the biggest problem with this movie. There is not much to talk about.
Okay, let's
Rather be playing any of the
let's
games.
talk about kind of what just sort of the cultural, just sort of what was going on in the culture at the time, what people thought about in terms of Final Fantasy. The idea that this movie kind of was doomed from the start. I want to say that it had such a huge budget And then
Yes.
the story and the setting and everything is just so unfamiliar to anybody that doesn't know Final Fantasy. The idea is already such a hard sell for people who know Final Fantasy, of course, as a fantasy, or at least they've heard about the franchise. And Final Fantasy was still, they were coming on the tail of 7, which was the most popular game in the franchise.
Mhm.
And that was
Most
what
definitely
most
most
people knew
popular.
about it. They knew about it as sort of the sci-fi thing, but there's still nothing familiar about it. They kind of went way off the rails. And the idea is, I think the problem with this movie is very similar to kind of everything, all the Final Fantasy games after that came after this, because this was this was like a month before 10 came out. They have this emphasis on the games that are very visually impressive, ideas that really push the limits of what the technology is capable of doing, really interesting ideas for world building, but then the story is absolute horseshit.
Mm.
You know, something else I just realized as I sat here staring at the Final Fantasy Spirits Within poster as Aki's face becomes burned into my memory. Um, the art design in this movie does not look Japanese. Like, it looks like a Western.
Oh.
Like
Actually, I'm trying to remember who it was, but I do know that Square teamed up with a company outside of Square to do the actual animation.
like
Like
they
they sent their best guys over there to help direct it and stuff, but I recall it was either like somewhere in Australia or something like that they were getting other people from to actually get the animation done.
like if this was an actual video game, I would assume that it was made by like Blizzard or BioWare or some other Western studio, not like a Japanese studio.
Especially some of the like big epic background scenes, it does feel like that, definitely.
Yeah, it is just a dour movie. There's no color in this movie.
No, so
That too, the color palette
Which-
is not
which-
not typical of Square
which funny
Or
enough,
Japan in general.
in Japan in
Yeah.
general. Usually,
Well,
there's some dour ones too in Japan, but
which-
not like this.
which you
Maybe
could
they
kind of
thought maybe they thought appealing to a Western audience meant make it boring.
well, not
To be
sure about-
fair,
I mean,
I do get that feeling once in a while, depending on what they throw at us.
which is a funny hindsight with the no color and saturation, considering how layered down in the road of the video game industry we would get into what we would probably call the brown age.
Yeah,
Because we call it, because the second Call of Duty came in, every game was just
Gray, brown,
gray and
beige.
brown.
that's what I love so much about Nintendo. They make games with actual fucking color in it.
Color,
Right.
yeah. I mean, hell, like a dark game like Metroid, and yet even when you're like deep underground, there is so much color.
Everything is basically lit in those games by neon lights.
Yeah.
It feels like.
Yeah.
Yeah, but it's really an issue with like that's really another issue with like Western games because
Yeah.
you look at something like Final Fantasy 13, which people hated, but that game had color.
Oh yeah, I can go
Yeah,
along with that.
which and you do see a lot of similarity. There's a lot of similarities in this movie with like all the other Final Fantasy stuff. I mean, you got tropes that are kind of standard, which is, I guess, that you may interpret that as kind of Square retreading, going with what works, or retreading old ground, or whatever
Yeah.
that. But
People
you
are
can
making
find a lot of
decisions.
stuff in this that reminds us of things like Final Fantasy 13. And Final Fantasy 13 started development in 2004, which was 3 years after this movie came out. So you could totally see
Yeah.
them sort of being in a similar space as they're designing these characters. Like the armor of the soldiers looks
yeah,
a lot
the-
very much like Final Fantasy 13.
Yeah, the
Yeah,
the soldier's armor looked like the SciComm armor from Final Fantasy 13.
Even Aki Ross looks a little bit like Lightning. Like different hair maybe, but
I was gonna say more aligned with maybe. I was gonna say more with Fang if she just let her hair get floofy.
So the important question is, do you think Aki Ross is anybody's waifu?
I doubt
she was-
it.
I doubt it.
I-
I doubt many people remember her long enough.
I could think there was probably at least a few people out there who probably does.
Oh, I mean, maybe back in the day,
in the
for a
day,
good
in the
couple
day.
months there or something. But we're talking like now, and I'm pretty sure that's a no.
No,
Then,
I
in that case,
absolutely
yeah.
think not.
There's not
Yeah.
enough fan attention or
No.
retention to actually make that warrant.
So
I
so,
mean, the
so
lowest
what you're
female-
saying is that I'm more likely to be somebody's waifu.
Yes.
Yes,
Yes,
yes.
yes.
hmm
Send your fan art to this address below.
I'm more likely to be somebody's husbando, and I'm just a skeleton right now.
I'm
You
sure.
want to jump your
yeah,
bones.
I'm sure
I-
if you catch Deadlock on a bad day, maybe I am, just for being a skeleton.
I'm not even gonna go there.
Should we maybe go around to our final thoughts? Because I think we're kind of running out of steam.
Well, we ran out of steam hours ago. We're just rambling.
Well, we may
Pretty
have
much.
been going for hours, but I might feel like it while talking about this movie.
Yeah.
Matt, final thoughts.
Final thoughts. Yeah, every viewing of this movie kind of goes further and further down the rabbit hole for me. It gets more and more bland and hard to watch. The visuals are impressive, but the story has definitely not aged well, and I think a lot of people called that out early on. Sadly,
The thing is, I don't think it's had aged well. It wasn't even good at the time. So I don't even know if you could call it not aging well.
well, there's diehards that were willing to put up with it, but I think that time frame has long since passed. Is what I'm saying.
Yeah, well, I mean, I could see maybe when this came out, there might have been some people that liked it more because there weren't as much. There wasn't like a huge dearth.
They liked it
there wasn't a big selection of good sci-fi action movie kind of things at the time.
or they liked it because it was the kind of plot that you had to think about, the kind that it didn't spell everything out for you. It's like, no, you just didn't like it because it didn't explain, it didn't treat you like an idiot. It's like, no, I didn't like it because it's a boring movie.
Yeah.
So do you have any other final thoughts about it than that, TZ?
This movie has really kind of been me sort of slowly discovering that not everything is great. Not everything that you like as a series ends up being good. So this movie had so much potential that it really kind of reminds me of the turning point for Final Fantasy, because that's what a lot of people say, that Final Fantasy IX was the last great one, that everything from there has been kind of downhill, and this movie really kind of fell on the cusp of that. So this movie kind of is a microcosm of the difference between classic Square and modern Square Enix.
Right.
So in that sense, it's kind of an interesting movie to see. But I have had no desire to watch this movie since the last time I saw it.
Because I think Final Fantasy,
for that.
I think Final Fantasy 11 was the final game that they released before merging with Enix. Squaresoft.
Yeah.
Might have been.
It was either 10 or 11. I can't remember for sure which it was, but like this movie was considered the reason they went bankrupt because they just lost massive amounts of money on it.
And that shows you why story is so important. You can put all the money into it, you create all this amazing technology, but if the story and if it doesn't resonate with people and you don't tell it in a story that people understand and can enjoy, and you just end up with a really dour, boring, kind of a dreadful movie to kind of sit through, it's not going to work out for you. So that pay your writers more.
As I think the angry nerd would put it, you could take a piece of shit, you can make that shit as pretty and as realistic and awesome looking as you can. It's still a piece of shit.
And that's why I'm hesitant to call this movie a piece of shit, because there's a lot of there's a lot of technical marvels in this movie. There's a lot of impressive stuff in it. It's just not a very fun movie to watch. You just don't want to sit through it again. That's
the
really
problem is
That still makes it a piece of shit.
Yeah, you're just too unwilling to call a spade a spade.
Yeah.
Um,
You're unwilling to call the kettle black.
Ojunix,
right.
what are your final thoughts?
Final thoughts. As Sid would put it, it's warm.
The poo that you just passed.
Yes.
Man. Okay then. Well put. Well thought out.
Thank you.
Before we get to my final thoughts, I just had a thought. Matt, should we explain to people why it says Mentos, the fresh maker, in the corner of your background?
So one of our best jokes while watching this movie is the fact that as the I guess you call it the alien Gaia is being changed into the blue Gaia, it looked basically like it was becoming a Mentos commercial, and we just started joking. Ah, yes, Gaia now with Mentos, the fresh maker.
even
And have a
makes
refreshing mint flavor.
I think we were even joking how once you saw
spearmint saves us all.
we were joking how even when you see Sid walking along, it would have been funny if you just heard the Mentos theme song. I think that really tells you how bored we were that we were coming up with shit like this while watching it.
This is the jokes we're coming up with at the final act of this movie. Fuck this movie.
You see, it wasn't spirits that were going up into the sky after Gaia was restored or free or
It
whatever.
was minty freshness.
It's
Yeah.
Minty Freshness going up to the stars to save other worlds.
Yeah, they saved
Its
the
job
Earth.
here is done.
They basically saved the Earth by dropping a giant breath mint down.
It makes more sense than the rest of this plot.
Well, that makes me think of the freaking Seinfeld episode where the person was saved because the junior mint was
Junior
actually
mint.
dropped in him during his surgery.
Perhaps they were saved, maybe from something from above.
Tasty.
My final thoughts about this, aside from it being very boring, since I always talk about waifus a lot, I just have to say that I find it really weird that prior to the movie's release, they tried to promote Aki Ross as this new sex symbol, showing her in lingerie and shit. But then in the actual movie, she is always just wearing the most baggy,
Basic
plain
unisex,
outfit that would
full
not
body.
show off any curves at all.
I was gonna say the Maxim picture of her showed she has actually decent amount of curves. In the movie, she looks flat as a board.
Yeah, it's like anyone that saw any of that stuff that actually saw the movie were like, man, I was lied to.
Pretty much.
I think a lot of us were lied to.
Yeah, the title of the movie alone, they lied to us.
Well, technically, no.
In my ass. Watch as I fart them out.
No, he's talking about the Final Fantasy part.
Yeah,
I guess the spirits were within, since they were within Aki's body.
Yeah, and
Kinda, sorta. It's still bullshit.
and the spirit literally takes it out of her awkwardly.
So wait, I just realized, did the spirits get more action from Aki than the other main character did?
Yes.
Yeah, pretty much. Like I said, you literally see the thing go into her area.
You
And
tried
then
to push
it's just
so hard
like,
this
oh, so
relationship
actually
between
fucked it.
Gray and Aki, and when
Yeah.
fucking
Oh god, yeah.
Neil had better chemistry with Jane. And
Who we
they
haven't
had
even
terrible
mentioned.
chemistry
We haven't
together.
even mentioned Jane during this whole thing, because aside from her,
She's basically the badass from Aliens.
yeah, because aside from her
Voiced by
interaction,
Ross from Frasier.
aside from her interactions with Neil, like, she wasn't that memorable either. Like, none of the characters were.
Really, Neil was pretty much the only one.
And
He was
that's
only
because
good character because he had good quipping timing.
he
that
added-
actually saved him from being a dull character.
Yeah, he added
the-
levity.
Though the weird thing was, they almost feel like they were trying to slightly see like Neil and Jay might be a thing because
Yeah,
They
basically-
really didn't
the last-
do that. They just happened to always be together because obviously they work in the same group.
They kind
I
of
mean,
no.
kind of even implied they were a couple right before they died.
yeah, very much. Which is like, wow, that
That came out of nowhere. Was that supposed to be set up before?
Was that just so we felt sad when they die?
I was gonna say
Just so that we felt sad.
because
That part from where they weren't really a couple.
considering their spirits are their souls are blue, does that count as a form of blue balls?
Yes.
Oh man. So
More on the face.
So to wrap things up, I'm gonna start pointing out what the next movie is at the end of these. Next time on the Outhouse,
Z.
Doom.
Outhouse
We are
Z.
going to watch Doom, starring The Rock,
Yeah.
The Rock and
I got
Eomer.
entertainment. Yes, finally.
Speaking of
But
sci-fi video game movies,
Yeah, one that's actually supposed to be sci-fi.
Hmm?
One that's actually supposed to be sci-fi.
Yes.
Oh.
Yes, it was intended to be
yeah.
sci-fi, yes.
Yes.
All right. So until next time, everybody. I'd say happy gaming, but that wouldn't make any sense. Happy movie.
don't watch bad movies. Let us watch them for you.
Yes.
Ciao.
Although you should watch them so you understand what we're talking about.
Odd question. Are we going to do the sequel?
Maybe. Good night, everybody.